I'm Sarah, 26, and my story starts in an unconventional place. Underneath a car, watching my dad's calloused hands point out the intricate workings of an engine. You see, I'm that person who doesn't look like they'd know the difference between a carburetor and a catalytic converter. 5'3", long blonde hair, soft features, and a baby face that makes me look like I just got my learner's permit. But appearances can be deceiving. And that's exactly what makes this story so satisfying. I grew up in what we affectionately called the family garage. Not the fancy kind with spotless floors and gleaming tool cabinets, but the real kind, oil-stained, concrete. The persistent smell of motor oil and the sound of classic rock crackling through an ancient radio that had seen better days. My dad and brother are both mechanics, and while I chose a different career path, cars have always been in my blood. I remember the first time Dad let me help with an actual repair. I was 12, and most girls my age were getting into makeup and boy bands. Me? I was learning how to change brake pads on our old Chevy. Mom would watch from the kitchen window, probably wondering where she went wrong with her little princess. But Dad, he saw something different. "Sarah," he'd say, wiping his hands on that perpetually greasy rag tucked into his back pocket. "Knowing how things work isn't just about fixing them. It's about understanding when someone's trying to pull one over on you." Those words would end up being more prophetic than either of us could have imagined. My brother Jake was a harder sell on teaching his annoying little sister about cars. He'd roll his eyes whenever I'd follow him into the garage. But something changed the day I handed him exactly the right wrench without him having to ask. The proud smirk on his face said everything. I was officially part of the club. Weekends became our time. While other families had movie nights, we had maintenance nights. Dad would pick up pizza, and we'd gather around whatever vehicle needed attention that week. These weren't just repair sessions, they were lessons in life. Stories about difficult customers, and warnings about shops that would try to scam people who didn't know better. The worst ones, Dad would say, his voice serious as he showed me how to check the threading on spark plugs, are the ones who prey on young women or elderly folks. They see someone they think doesn't know cars and suddenly everything's dangerous and needs replacing. I soaked it all in. Not just the mechanical knowledge, but the ethics too. Dad ran his shop differently. Honest work for honest pay was his motto, and it showed in his loyal customer base. People would drive from 3 towns over just to have him work on their cars. The older I got, the more I understood that what I was learning wasn't just about cars. It was about confidence, integrity, and standing up for yourself. Sure, I might have looked like an easy target for shady mechanics, but underneath that exterior was years of knowledge and a growing sense of justice about how people should be treated. By the time I hit my 20s, I could handle most basic repairs myself. Oil changes, brake jobs, belt replacements, all while looking like someone who'd need to call their dad to put air in their tires. The contrast between how people saw me and what I could actually do became almost amusing. Almost. Life started getting busier, though. After college, I landed a job as a graphic designer, and suddenly my time wasn't my own anymore. The familiar rhythm of weekend repairs gave way to client meetings and project deadlines. My trusted companion through it all was my 2004 Avalon, a hand-me-down from my grandmother that looked every bit its age, but ran like a dream thanks to regular maintenance. The garage at my new apartment was tiny, barely big enough to open the car doors, let alone work comfortably. Sometimes I'd catch myself missing those long evenings in the family garage, the easy banter with Dad and Jake, the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles together. But adulting comes with its own challenges, and sometimes you have to make compromises you never thought you would, like taking your car to another shop for a simple oil change. What I didn't realize was that those years of lessons from Dad were about to come in handy in a way none of us expected. The incident at that shop would prove that sometimes the best revenge isn't just knowing your stuff, it's knowing exactly when and how to use that knowledge. It's funny how life sneaks up on you. One minute you're in your dad's garage, confidently swapping out spark plugs, and the next you're staring at your computer at 2 a.m., trying to figure out how to make a client's logo pop more while living off energy drinks and takeout. The transition from garage kid to working professional hit harder than a stuck lug nut. My tiny apartment was on the 3rd floor of a complex that had seen better days. The garage they advertised was basically a glorified carport with a roof that leaked when it rained, which, being Florida, was pretty much every afternoon. The first time I tried to change my oil there, I ended up with a lovely mix of rainwater and motor oil soaking through my shirt. Real professional look for the client meeting I had that afternoon. The Avalon, bless its heart, was starting to show its age in ways that perfectly matched my new adult life. The paint was fading in patches, just like my enthusiasm for meal prep. Sundays, the driver's seat had a worn spot that matched the growing bags under my eyes from late-night design revisions. But under the hood, that engine purred like a kitten, because some habits die hard. I still did most of my own maintenance, usually while on the phone with Dad. Our Sunday repair sessions had turned into long-distance troubleshooting calls. "How's the timing belt looking?" he'd ask, and I'd send him photos, both of us pretending this was just about car maintenance and not about staying connected. But lately, work had been intense. I'd landed a major client, the kind that could make or break a young designer's career. The project involved rebranding their entire corporate identity, and the deadlines were brutal. My usual weekend maintenance schedule got pushed aside for client meetings and endless revision cycles. My brother Jake stopped by one weekend, took one look at my makeshift workspace under the carport, and shook his head. "Sarah, you're going to throw your back out working like this. Dad's garage is always open, you know." I knew, but something in me wanted to prove I could handle everything on my own. The car, the career, the whole adult life thing. Pride's a funny thing that way. Sometimes it makes you do stupid things, like trying to change your oil in a thunderstorm. The breaking point came during a particularly hellish week. 3 client deadlines converged like a perfect storm. My coffee maker died, a tragedy of epic proportions, and my apartment's AC decided to take a vacation in the middle of a Florida summer. I was running on fumes, both literally and figuratively. That's when I noticed the oil change reminder sticker in my windshield. I'd been putting it off for weeks, telling myself I'd get to it when things calmed down. But between the deadlines and the weather and my increasingly unusable garage, something had to give. There was this place near my apartment, one of those quick service chains with the bright signs and free inspections. I'd driven past it 100 times, always with a slight smirk, remembering Dad's warnings about chain shops. But they advertised free Wi-Fi in their waiting room, and I figured I could at least get some work done while they changed my oil. Before heading over, I did my usual maintenance check, a habit I couldn't shake if I tried. Air filter, pristine thanks to my obsessive cleaning schedule. Brake pads, recently changed. Rotors, maybe 40K miles on them, still in great shape. Serpentine belt was practically new. The car was honestly in better shape than I was. I called Dad while I was doing my checks, our usual ritual. "Just taking her in for an oil change," I said, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end of the line, the kind of pause that usually preceded one of his life lessons. "Remember what I taught you about those chain shops?" he said finally. "They love to find problems that don't exist." "Dad, I'm just getting an oil change. I'll be in and out in an hour, tops. Besides, I know exactly what condition everything's in." Little did I know, I was about to get a masterclass in exactly why Dad had spent all those years teaching me about more than just cars. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come when you least expect them, and this simple oil change was about to turn into something none of us saw coming. You know that feeling when you're about to do something you know your parents warned you against? That little voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like your dad saying, "I told you so?" Yeah, that was me pulling into that chain shop's parking lot. But between my deadlines and the Florida heat turning my carport into a sauna, I figured how bad could it be? The place was busy, like Black Friday at Walmart busy. Every waiting room chair was filled with people staring at their phones or leafing through ancient magazines. The air conditioning was cranked so high it was like stepping into a meat locker, which honestly felt amazing after the humid hell outside. I walked up to the counter, where a guy who looked barely old enough to drive was tapping away at a computer. "Just an oil change," I said, sliding my keys across the counter. He barely looked up, just pushed a clipboard at me with a form to fill out. That's when I started noticing things. Little red flags that Dad had taught me to watch for. The walls were plastered with posters advertising limited-time specials that looked like they'd been there since the Bush administration. A TV mounted in the corner was playing some loop about the dangers of dirty air filters, complete with dramatic music that belonged in a horror movie. But what really caught my attention was the sales pitch I could overhear from the other side of the waiting room. Some poor elderly guy was being told his car needed about $2,000 worth of work. All urgent and safety critical, of course. The salesman was doing that thing Dad had warned me about, using scary words like catastrophic, failure, and complete breakdown. I found myself unconsciously running through my mental checklist of my car's condition. Air filter? Check. Brakes? Check. Belts? Check. It was like a security blanket of knowledge, and I wrapped myself in it while pretending to work on my laptop. Middle-aged woman sat down next to me, clutching an estimate like it was a death sentence. "I just came in for a tire rotation," she whispered, more to herself than to me. I glanced at the paper. They'd somehow found $800 worth of urgent repairs. My blood started to simmer. That's when I opened my work bag and pulled out my secret weapon, a folder full of detailed maintenance records and photos. Dad had drilled this habit into me since I started driving. "Documentation is your best defense against scammers," he always said. Every repair, every part replacement, every oil change, all logged with dates and mileage. I even had before and after photos of my recent brake job. clear shots of my pristine air filter, and detailed pictures of my belts. Call it paranoid, but growing up with two mechanics teaches you to be prepared. Plus, being a graphic designer means I'm a little obsessive about documentation anyway. While I was flipping through my folder, I watched their technique with other customers. It was like a well-rehearsed play. First, the grave face when they emerged from the service area, then the concerned head shake while looking at their clipboard. Finally, I hate to tell you this, but speech that always ended in a massive repair bill. I texted my brother Jake, "You won't believe where I am right now." His response was instant. "Please tell me you're not at one of those quick lube places. Desperate times, desperate measures. But don't worry, I'm prepared. Dad's gonna lose it when he hears about this. Want me to call him? Not yet. Let's see how this plays out." I could see my car through the service bay window. They were just finishing up the oil change, but the guy was spending an awful lot of time poking around under the hood. That's when I noticed him walk over to a workbench, pick something up, and head back to my car. My phone buzzed again. Jake had sent a meme of Michael Scott from The Office saying, "Oh God, it's happening," followed by, "Keep us posted. This is gonna be good." The service advisor, different from the kid at the counter, was making his rounds. He had that same grave expression I'd been watching him practice on other customers all morning, clipboard. In hand, he was working his way through the waiting room like a doctor delivering bad news. I quickly fired off one more text to Jake. "Show's about to start. Wish me luck." His response, "Break a leg, sis. Make Dad proud." I slipped my phone into my pocket and put on my best innocent expression as the advisor approached. Time to see if all those years of lessons were about to pay off. The game was about to begin, and I had front row seats to what was about to become the most entertaining oil change of my life. The service advisor approached with the kind of expression usually reserved for telling someone their goldfish didn't make it. Clipboard held dramatically against his chest. He gestured to the empty seat next to me. "Ma'am, we need to discuss the inspection results." I'd been watching his routine all morning, so I knew what was coming. The same performance he'd given the elderly man and the tired mom, just with me cast as the naive young woman who clearly couldn't tell a timing belt from a seatbelt. Is everything okay?" I asked, channeling my inner Disney princess, wide eyes, slight tremor in my voice. The whole package. The folder of maintenance records sat hidden in my work bag like a secret weapon. He cleared his throat. "Well, miss, I'm afraid we found some concerning issues during our complimentary inspection." The way he emphasized complimentary made it sound like he was doing me a huge favor. "Actually, if you'll come with me, I'd like to show you something." Bingo. The show and tell portion of the performance. I followed him to a workbench near the service bay, noticing how he positioned himself so the other customers could see his presentation. Theater in the round, mechanic style. That's when he pulled out my air filter, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. The pristine filter I'd checked just that morning was now decorated with what looked like the floor, sweepings from a barn. There was actual hair stuck in it. And was that a dead wasp? Points for creativity, I guess. "As you can see," he said, giving the filter a sad shake, "this is in terrible condition. Honestly, I'm surprised your car is still running." He paused for dramatic effect. But unfortunately, that's not the worst of it. What followed was an Oscar-worthy monologue about all the deadly serious problems he'd discovered. Bad brake pads, the ones I'd just replaced. Shot rotors with only 40K miles on them. A failing serpentine belt, the new one I'd installed. And my personal favorite, a dying AC compressor. In Florida, in summer, he might as well have told me my car was going to burst into flames. "The total for all the urgent repairs comes to about $2,500, he said, flipping through his clipboard. "But because we caught these issues during a routine oil change, I can offer you our special pricing." I could feel my phone buzzing in my pocket, probably Jake wondering how the show was going, but I was too busy watching the advisor's face, noting how he'd positioned himself so other customers could overhear. He wanted witnesses for his good deed of saving the helpless young lady from her dangerous car. Time to put those community theater classes from college to good use. "Oh my God," I gasped, hand flying to my chest. "That sounds so serious." I had no idea I was driving something so dangerous. I could see other customers looking up from their phones, drawn into the drama unfolding before them. The advisor nodded gravely, probably mentally calculating his commission. "It's good we caught this now. These kinds of issues," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "they can be deadly." I let my voice crack slightly. "I can't afford all that right now. Would it be okay if I called my dad? Maybe he could help?" I was already pulling out my phone, noting the growing audience of bored waiting room customers. "Of course, take your time," he said magnanimously. "But I should mention, this special pricing is only good today." I fired off a quick text to Dad. "I'm calling in a sec. Play along. You're going to love this." Then I dialed his number, putting it on speaker because, well, everyone deserves a good show. "Daddy?" I made sure my voice trembled just enough. "I need your help. The mechanic says my car is really dangerous and I'm scared to drive it and I don't know what to do." What happened next would have made any improv teacher proud. My dad, bless him, didn't miss a beat. He played the concerned father perfectly, asking all the right questions with just the right amount of parental worry. Each time the advisor listed another critical repair, Dad responded with the perfect mix of shock and gratitude that someone had caught these problems. The waiting room had gone quiet. Every person was watching our little drama unfold, and I could feel the tension building. The advisor was practically glowing with self-importance, completely unaware that he was walking right into a trap of his own making. The advisor was practically bouncing on his heels as Dad asked him to explain all the problems he'd found. Each time Dad expressed shock and concern, I could see the guy's confidence growing. He was probably already counting his commission in his head. "Oh, and the air filter!" I exclaimed, playing up my distress. "Can you show my dad what you found in there? It's so scary." The advisor eagerly held up my filter, now decorated with his artistic arrangement of shop floor debris. "As you can see, sir," he said into my phone, giving the filter another theatrical shake, "there's significant contamination. We found," he paused for effect, "a dead wasp in there." Dad's voice came through the speaker, dripping with mock horror. "A wasp? Oh my goodness. Sarah, honey, how long has it been since you changed that filter?" I bit my lip to keep from smirking. "I don't know, Daddy. I can't remember." The lie felt delicious, considering I had photos of myself changing that very filter just weeks ago. The waiting room audience was fully invested now. An elderly couple had set aside their magazines. A guy in a business suit had stopped pretending to work on his laptop. Even the receptionist had paused his phone, scrolling to watch the drama unfold. "And the brake pads," the advisor continued, warming to his captive audience, "they're completely worn. Metal on metal. Very unsafe." He shuffled through his clipboard. "Importantly, the rotors are scored, calipers are sticking, and the serpentine belt is showing critical wear." Dad's acting was Oscar-worthy. "Metal on metal? My baby girl has been driving like that? Thank goodness you caught this." "The total comes to $2,500, the advisor said. "But with our special pricing today, oh, whatever it costs." Dad interrupted, playing the concerned father perfectly. "My daughter's safety is worth any price. Can you tell me exactly what you found wrong with each part?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The advisor launched into a detailed explanation of everything, supposedly wrong with my brake system. With each word, he dug himself deeper, describing damage that simply didn't exist. I made a show of wiping my eyes, sniffling a little. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have been more careful." No, sweetheart. I'm just glad these professionals caught all this before something terrible happened. That was my cue. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The laughter started small. A giggle, really, but it quickly grew into full-blown cackling. The advisor stopped mid-sentence, confusion spreading across his face. "Dad," I managed between laughs, "tell him about the brake pads I installed last month. You know, the ones you helped me pick out?" There was a beat of silence. Then Dad's laughter exploded through the phone speaker. The advisor's face went from confused to concerned to oh shit in record time. "And the air filter." I reached into my bag and pulled out my folder, flipping it open to reveal dated photos of my pristine air filter installation. Funny how it got so dirty in just a few weeks. Almost like someone— I gave him a pointed look, added some extra debris for dramatic effect. The waiting room had gone dead silent. Then someone in the back whispered, "Oh snap." And the spell broke. The elderly couple started whispering to each other. The businessman was suddenly very interested in his phone, probably looking up reviews of the shop. "I have photos of every repair and maintenance check I've done," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Would you like to see the new serpentine belt? The brake rotors that only have 40K miles on them? The calipers that are working perfectly fine?" The advisor's face had gone from red to white to red again. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Dad was still laughing through the phone. "Baby girl, I think you just made your old man proud. Should we tell him about your shop, Dad? The one where you and Jake have been teaching me about cars since I was 12? The advisor looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. The elderly couple was now openly chuckling, and I noticed several people pulling out their phones, probably updating their own reviews of the place. But I wasn't done yet. This wasn't just about embarrassing one scammy advisor. This was about every person who'd sat in this waiting room and been fed lies about their vehicles. About every woman who'd been talked down to. Every elderly person who'd been scared into unnecessary repairs. I handed the advisor my air filter. "I think you should go clean this off now. And I want to watch you put it back exactly where you found it." My voice was steady, professional, channeling every ounce of my father's calm authority when dealing with difficult situations at his shop. The waiting room had erupted into a buzz of whispered conversations. The elderly couple who'd been watching the whole scene unfold were now examining their own repair quote with newfound skepticism. The businessman who'd been quoted $800 for urgent repairs was already on his phone, canceling the work authorization he'd signed. That's when the supervisor emerged from his office, Clearly, someone had clued him in that something was going down. He was a tall guy in a pressed shirt with district manager embroidered on the pocket, the kind of person who probably hadn't actually worked on a car in years. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, trying to sound authoritative while reading the room. "Oh, there are several problems," I said, still holding my folder of maintenance records. "Would you like to start with the fraudulent inspection report, or should we discuss the practice of contaminating clean parts to scare customers?" Dad was still on speakerphone. "I'm particularly interested in hearing about the metal on metal brake pads my daughter supposedly has, considering I personally helped her install new ones last month." The supervisor's face did this interesting dance between customer service smile and oh shit grimace. "Why don't we discuss this in my office?" "Actually," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I think right here is perfect. Everyone in this waiting room deserves to know what's going on." That's when the elderly woman who'd been watching everything spoke up. "They told me I needed new brake lines, said they were about to burst." "That's true too, isn't it?" The sarcasm in her voice could have stripped paint. It was like a dam breaking. Suddenly, everyone had a story. The businessman with his $800 quote, a college student who'd been told her transmission was failing, a mom who'd been scared into replacing perfectly good tires. The supervisor was trying desperately to regain control of the situation. "I assure you, our inspections are thorough and professional." Professional? I pulled out my phone and started swiping through photos. "Let me show you what professional looks like. Here's my brake pad installation from last month. Note the date stamp and condition. Here's my air filter, taken this morning before I came in. And here's my maintenance log, tracking every repair and replacement with dates and mileage." The elderly couple had moved closer to look at my photos. The husband let out a low whistle. "Young lady, you certainly know your stuff." "I should," I smiled. "I grew up in a real mechanics shop, the kind that doesn't need to scam people to make money." The supervisor was now in full damage control mode. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. We could offer you a complimentary—" "The only thing I want," I interrupted, "is for my air filter to be cleaned and properly reinstalled, and my oil change completed." "Which, by the way, I'll be verifying was actually done and done correctly," Dad chimed in from the phone. "Make sure they use the right oil filter. These places are notorious for using the cheapest ones they can find." The supervisor's eye twitched slightly. I had a feeling my oil filter was about to be mysteriously double-checked. While the advisor scurried off to clean my air filter, something unexpected started happening. People began exchanging phone numbers. The elderly couple was talking with the college student about finding a reliable mechanic. The businessman was showing others how to dispute charges on their credit cards. "Young lady," the elderly woman called out, "does your father's shop have a business card? My husband and I have been looking for an honest mechanic since we moved." "Here." I smiled and reached into my bag. Dad had always insisted I carry a few of his cards. "You never know when someone might need honest help," he'd say. As I handed her a card, I noticed others looking interested too. The supervisor was watching this impromptu networking session with barely concealed horror. His waiting room had transformed into a support group for scammed customers, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Dad's calling every mechanic he knows in the area. This story's going to be legendary at the next trade association meeting." The advisor returned with my now clean air filter, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I followed him out to watch the reinstallation, but my mind was already spinning with something bigger. This wasn't just about one oil change or one scammy shop anymore. This was about all the people who didn't have someone to teach them about cars, who didn't know how to stand up to these tactics. Word spreads fast in a small community, especially when it involves someone getting spectacularly called out on their BS. By the time I got back to my apartment that evening, my phone was blowing up. Jake had shared the story with every mechanic he knew. Dad's phone was ringing off the hook, and somehow I'd become a minor legend in the local automotive repair scene. But the real surprise came the next day at work. I was deep in my design project when Linda, one of our account managers, poked her head into my cubicle. "Hey, were you the girl who stood up to that scammy mechanic yesterday?" I looked up, confused. "How did you—" "My mother was there. The elderly lady who asked for your dad's card? She called me last night, absolutely raving about the young woman who knew more about cars than all those mechanics put together." That's when I realized this story had legs beyond just one afternoon of revenge. Linda's mom had apparently shared it with her bridge club, who shared it with their families, who shared it on social media. Within days, that chain shop's review pages were flooded with people sharing their own experiences and warning others. But here's where it gets interesting. A week later, I was at Dad's shop helping him organize some paperwork. Yes, even professional. Mechanics need someone who knows their way around a spreadsheet. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Not with customers calling about repairs, but with people asking if he'd be willing to teach a basic car maintenance class. "I keep getting calls," Dad said, scratching his head. "Mostly women and elderly folks. They say they heard about what happened at that chain place and want to learn enough to not get taken advantage of." That's when the idea hit me. "Dad, What if we actually did it? What if we taught people the basics? He looked skeptical. I'm a mechanic, not a teacher. But you taught me and Jake. And look how that turned out. The next Saturday, we hosted our first Know Your Car workshop in Dad's shop. We expected maybe 5 or 6 people. 27 showed up. The elderly couple from the chain shop was there, along with the college student who'd been quoted for a transmission she didn't need. Linda from my office brought her teenage daughter. I'll never forget the look on Dad's face as he demonstrated how to check oil levels and tire pressure. He was in his element, breaking down complex systems into simple explanations, just like he'd done for me all those years. Jake showed up halfway through and jumped right in, teaching people how to spot signs of actual wear versus manufactured problems. The best part? People started sharing their own stories of being scammed or pressured into unnecessary repairs. But now, instead of feeling helpless or embarrassed, they were angry, empowered, ready to learn. Word kept spreading. The next workshop had 40 people, then 60. We had to start a waiting list. Local news caught wind of it. Did a small piece about a family-run shop teaching car maintenance basics to combat repair fraud. That's when things really exploded. Other honest mechanics in the area started offering similar workshops. Dad's colleague in the next town over called to say he was starting his own program. The local community college reached out about possibly offering a basic automotive maintenance course. Remember that chain shop? Their business dropped so significantly they had to replace their entire service staff. The new manager actually reached out to Dad, asking if he'd be willing to train their technicians on ethical inspection practices. The irony was not lost on any of us, but the real impact wasn't in the business side of things. It was in the people. The elderly woman who now confidently checks her own oil level. The single mom who can tell when someone's trying to sell her unnecessary repairs. The teenage girls who no longer feel intimidated walking into an auto shop. One evening, after a particularly successful workshop, I was helping Dad clean up the shop. He was quieter than usual, wiping down his tools with the same methodical care he'd taught me years ago. You know, he finally said, when you were little and started following me around the garage, your mom worried you'd end up a grease monkey instead of having a proper career. He smiled, putting away the last wrench. But I think you've done something bigger here than either of us imagined. I looked around the shop, at the walls now decorated with thank you cards from workshop participants, at the calendar full of upcoming class dates, at the growing community we'd somehow created. But my mind kept going back to that day at the chain shop, to that moment of standing up not just for myself, but for everyone who'd ever felt powerless in a mechanic's waiting room. It's funny how life has a way of coming full circle. Last weekend, I was back in Dad's shop. But this time, I wasn't the one learning. I was teaching. My cousin Emma, 16 and recently licensed, was lying on a creeper next to me as I showed her how to check for signs of brake wear. So if anyone ever tells you your rotors are scored, I explained, pointing with my flashlight, this is what you're looking for. She nodded, taking photos with her phone just like I used to do. The shop has changed a lot in the past year. There's a proper classroom area now, with chairs and a whiteboard. Photos of successful workshop graduates line one wall, while the other displays before and after shots of various car parts, visual aids for teaching people what actual wear looks like versus manufactured problems. Dad's semi-retired now, though you wouldn't know it from how often he's still at the shop. He says he's just consulting, but really he loves being part of what we've built. Jake runs the repair side of things, while I handle the education program between my design projects. Turns out my graphic design skills came in handy. We have proper training materials now, not just Dad's old handwritten notes. Remember Linda from my office? Her daughter Casey is now our star student. She's planning to study automotive engineering in college next year. The elderly couple, they've become regulars at our weekend workshops, not to learn anymore, but to share their stories and encourage others. They bring cookies because according to them, every good lesson needs snacks. The chain shop, they eventually closed down, but something better took its place. One of our workshop graduates, a former teacher, bought the location. She turned it into an honest repair shop with a twist. They offer free basic car maintenance classes every month. They even hired that college student who'd been quoted for a fake transmission problem. She discovered she had a knack for diagnostics and went to technical school. But the best part happened just last month. I was doing an oil change on my trusty old Avalon, still running like a dream, thank you very much, when a young woman pulled into the shop. She looked nervous, clutching a repair quote from another place that was clearly trying to scam her. I heard this was the place to come, she said, if you want to learn how to not get ripped off. As I looked at her, I saw myself from a year ago, but also everyone else who'd ever felt helpless in a mechanic's waiting room. The difference was, now we could do something about it. Actually, I smiled, we're starting a workshop in about 20 minutes. Want to join? She did. And as I watched her face light up when she successfully checked her own oil level for the first time, I thought about that day at the chain shop. How what started as a simple act of standing up to a scammer turned into something so much bigger. Dad walked in as we were wrapping up, carrying a box of his legendary workshop donuts. Look at you, he said, watching me help the new student document her car's maintenance points. Teaching instead of learning. I'm still learning, I replied. Just different things now, he nodded, understanding. You know, when you were little, I thought I was just teaching you about cars. Turns out we were building something bigger. Later that evening, as I was closing up the shop, I found an old photo that had fallen behind the new filing cabinet. It showed 12-year-old me, covered in grease, proudly holding up my first successfully changed spark plug. Dad was in the background, beaming with pride. I pinned it to the wall alongside all our workshop graduation photos, because that's really what this whole thing has been about. Passing on knowledge, building confidence, and standing up for what's right. Not just about cars, but about helping people discover their own strength. My phone buzzed. A text from the new student. Thank you for today. I feel like I can finally walk into a repair shop without being scared. I looked around the shop one last time before heading out. At the classroom area where we turn confusion into confidence. At the wall of success stories. At the next generation of Emma and Casey, learning not just about cars, but about standing up for themselves. Yeah, that oil change scammer had no idea what he was starting. But I'm glad he tried it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing one person's lies. It's making sure those lies never work on anyone else again. As for me, I'm still that 5'3" blonde with the baby face. Still drive my beat-up Avalon. Still get underestimated by people who think they can pull one over on me. But now I know I'm part of something bigger. Something that's changing lives, one oil change at a time.